What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel, and today, as you can tell by the title, we are back with another updated hero guide, this time focusing on our little green friend Master Yoda. A few months back I did do a poll to see if you guys did want to see all of the hero guides get updated, which as you can see by the result was a pretty resounding yes. Yoda has changed a fair bit since the old hero guide went up, and he's been one of the more highly requested characters since I did that poll, and so I thought I'd get this out there as soon as I could. Now, you can see on screen what we're going to be going through in this video. We will of course start off with his base stats, then go through and break down all of his abilities, and then I will touch on some tips for both Galactic Assault and the hero game modes, covering both the star cards as well as just some general gameplay tips as well. So if that is what you are looking for in a hero guide, then make sure to drop a like on the video. Now, keep in mind that almost everything in this guide was tested in arcade, and while I'm 99% sure that all of these stats do transfer over to multiplayer, just bear in mind that there is always a chance that some stats may change from arcade to multiplayer, so if you see any stats that don't seem right, then that's most likely what's happened. So, getting stuck right into it, first off we're going to take a look at his base HP, and he does have a slightly lower than average health pool for a saber user, coming in with 700 HP, however he does also have a health buff as well, so overall his health is definitely not an issue. On top of that, he does also have 250 health regen as well, which again is pretty much the average for the saber users, so you can go from 700 HP all the way down to 450 and still be able to regen all the way back to full health. Now, his weapon of choice is of course his custom sized lightsaber, and this has actually been given a pretty decent buff since the last hero guide. It deals 125 damage per hit from the front and 150 damage per hit from behind, which is just slightly lower than the average saber user, but when I say lower, it's actually only about 5 or 10 damage difference per hit, so overall it's actually really not that noticeable. He has a swing speed of 1.6 swings per second, again just slightly below the average, but this did actually used to be 1.2 swings per second about 6 months ago, so again he did receive a pretty nice buff in that regard. His lunge distance is what I'd probably class as medium. Some lunges actually seem to go really far, especially when it's the first swing, but other times his lunge is actually the complete opposite because of the way he jumps around, so it is a little inconsistent in terms of how far he lunges when you swing the saber. As for his stamina pool, I have classed this as medium, but it is probably slightly better than average, at least when it comes to blocking anyway, but as for his swing stamina, it's pretty much on par with the average once again. Now, moving on to his abilities, and he does have a pretty well-rounded set of abilities. Altogether, they aren't anything spectacular or anything like that, but they do all serve a good purpose and can definitely make a solid improvement to your gameplay if you do use them all in tandem. His L1 ability is called Unleash, which has a 12-second cooldown, and this one is pretty much just a force push, however it's actually tied to his block ability. As you absorb shots with his block, it will actually charge the ability, and once it is fully charged, it turns the regular 110 damage into 160 damage, which is obviously a one-hit kill on most classes, as well as actually increasing the area of effect as well. Unleash is really great for fending off multiple enemies at once and clearing rooms, and it is also a decent form of defense against enemy villains by allowing you to just gain some space if you are under a lot of pressure. As for its weaknesses though, it does tend to bug you out a fair bit, pretty similar to pretty much every force ability in the game, and so despite it being a good ability when it does work, you definitely shouldn't ever rely on it too heavily or it can lead to some very frustrating deaths. Moving on now to his L1R1 ability, this one is called Presence and it has a 20-second cooldown. When the ability is activated, it gives Yoda and any nearby teammates a health buff of 150 HP, which lasts for about 7 seconds before it will start to slowly drain back to normal. This ability is probably one of the best in the game when it comes to helping out your teammates. If you're defending an objective and buff your squad, it's going to make that objective all that much harder for the enemies to take, and it obviously does give you a nice health advantage against enemy villains as well. Its only real downside is that it is meant to break stuns, which the description does still say, but it seems to be currently bugged where it actually won't always work. A lot of people have said that the stun ability was removed, so that could be it, but it does still work in arcade as well as still being in the description of the ability as well, so I'm not too sure, but at the end of the day that definitely doesn't seem to work 100% of the time. Moving on now to the R1 ability, this one is his dash attack and it has a very short 4-second cooldown, as well as actually being able to be used twice rather than just the once. As the name suggests, this just sends Yoda dashing forward with his saber, dealing 85 damage per hit, which was actually recently nerfed quite a bit. This ability is great for making ground on any enemies who are maybe trying to run away or trying to roll around. It's almost impossible to dodge this ability, so it's great to use as a finisher, and it also breaks lightsaber blocks as well, which is obviously very handy. As for its weaknesses, I honestly couldn't really think of any glaring weaknesses. The only one I thought I should mention is that if you're not paying enough attention, you can often fall off the edge of maps, but for the most part that shouldn't really be an issue. So that's it for all of his base stats and abilities. Now we're going to move on to some of the more important stuff, starting with his best star cards for Galactic Assault. Obviously, it really does come down to personal preference, so these definitely aren't the only cards that you can use, but these are just the cards that I think are the most important and most well-suited cards for Galactic Assault. So the first card I'm going to mention is his agility card, and this is the one that allows you to have that extra dash attack, taking it to 3 total uses, but it does come at the cost of a 10% longer cooldown. The cooldown for the ability is only 4 seconds, so with 10% of that you're looking at not even half a second extra cooldown time, and that is well worth it to gain that extra dash attack, which can be useful in multiple different situations. The next card I'd recommend using is the Feel the Force card, and this one makes it so that the Presence ability gives you an extra 60 HP worth of bonus health when you use it. That obviously takes 150 bonus HP up to a 210 bonus instead, so a more than 25% increase is definitely worth it in my opinion. Now for the third card, I'd mainly recommend using the Opposing the Dark Side card, which increases his saber damage when you use it against enemy villains. This one is probably more of a precautionary card than anything, so it's definitely not a must-have, but for me personally, I can often struggle against enemy villains with Yoda, so this does at least help to defend myself if I do get attacked by a hero. Now, the last card I'm going to mention is probably to just replace that last card if you don't feel you need the extra help against heroes, and if that is the case, another good option is the Lightsaber Mastery Star card. This one makes it so that your stamina drains by up to 15% less when swinging your saber, and even though that's not really anything crazy, it can actually be really helpful to just give you that little bit of extra stamina to take care of those last few enemies if you do find yourself running out of stamina. Now, like I said, these are the main cards that I would personally recommend using. However, if you do disagree, then definitely feel free to let us all know down in the comments section, as there really is no right or wrong when it comes to something like choosing star cards. So now moving on to some of the best maps to choose Yoda on when you're playing Galactic Assault, and the top 3 that I've picked are Endor, the Death Star, and Kashyyyk. With Endor and Kashyyyk, Yoda blends in so well with all the trees and the grass and stuff like that, and it really does allow him to just move around much more freely than any other saber user. And as for the Death Star, the tight hallways just suit his agility extremely well. Now obviously that doesn't mean that these are the only 3 maps you can choose him on. He's honestly great on, I would say, literally every single map in the game, but these ones are probably just a good starting place if you're not too sure what to choose him on. Now, as for some tips for Galactic Assault, and like I just mentioned, Yoda is a really agile and pretty sneaky little character, and honestly if you play to his strengths and just try and play it smart over the course of the game, he can genuinely be pretty unstoppable and almost borderline overpowered. Due to how small he is and how quickly he can get around the map, you do need to keep in mind that you are going to be pretty hard for your enemies to shoot at, but that's only the case if you do keep on the move. Yoda isn't really the type of character that you want to walk around with holding your block or anything like that. Keeping on the move, dodging, sprinting and jumping around the place is always the best way to survive for a longer period, because I'm sure you will know just how hard it can be to shoot the little bastard when you're going up against him. If you do decide you want to try and play him a little tankier than how I just mentioned, it can definitely still work because he does have a decent block, a force push and a health buff. But that playstyle is definitely a little risky because if you do get caught off guard, only having 700 HP can result in a quick death, especially against enemy saber heroes. Another thing that I mentioned for pretty much every saber hero is to always turn off your saber when you're running around the map, and this is especially the case for Yoda, since when his saber is turned off he can be extremely hard to see, which is obviously going to work in your advantage. No matter how small he may be, if you are running around with a big green glow, then you're going to stand out like a sore thumb. So to actually make the most of that last tip, you do need to make sure to turn off his saber at all times, and if you're unsure how to do that, it is the square button on PS4 and the X button on Xbox, and then just whatever keybind you've set it to on PC. Lastly, and I did mention the exact same thing on my Vader hero guide, but a lot of people will use Presence almost to regenerate health once they've lost it, but you should always use it before getting into a fight rather than after. Using it after means it's actually not going to fully regen your health, it'll only be a temporary boost. So let's just say you're in a bad situation, you lose 500 HP, meaning you're down to 200, then once it regens back you'll be back to 450 until you actually gain some more back from getting kills. If you use Presence then, obviously you'll quickly go up to 600 HP, which seems pretty decent, but that will eventually go back down to 450 once the ability runs out. Now let's say you activate it before a fight, you'll actually start with 910 HP, then once you lose that 500 in the fight, you'll then be down to 410 HP, which can actually regen back to 660 rather than 450 like it was in the last example. So right there, that pretty much shows that if you do activate it before a fight, even if you take the exact same amount of damage, you'll end up with over 200 more base HP after the fight. So hopefully I explained that well enough, because obviously with lots of numbers involved it can get pretty confusing. Other than that, like I said earlier, just combine your abilities, keep on the move and try to play fairly aggressive, and it will definitely go a long way towards improving your Yoda gameplay overall. I will also link my Yoda killstreak breakdown up in the top right corner for those of you who want some more GA tips as well, so make sure to check that one out after the video. So that is going to do it for the Galactic Assault tips. Now we're going to move on to some tips for the hero vs villain game mode. So starting off with the best star cards, and honestly Yoda doesn't really have the greatest cards, so all three of these are just actually the same as my GA cards. But again, that is just my preference and it's not the guaranteed best cards or anything like that. The first card is again the agility card for that extra dash. Like I mentioned, this one can break blocks, so this one is kind of a no-brainer when it comes to fighting villains. The second card again is the Feel the Force card with that 60 extra HP, and keep in mind that it's 60 more HP for you, but it's also 60 more for your teammates if you can buff them all, and combined that's a nice 240 HP bonus for your team just from this card alone. As for the third card, again this one is just the Opposing the Dark Side card, which deals more damage to enemy heroes, and again this is a no-brainer, so there's really not too much to cover there. Now moving on to some tips for the hero game modes, and if I'm going to be honest, most of it can sort of be transferred straight from GA, so I won't cover too much, but I will just touch on what I mentioned. Again, staying on the move is super important as Yoda because of how quickly you can get melted if you just stand still and get hit from behind, so you do want to play aggressively but also make sure to stay on the move. I like to think of it as almost sort of a mosquito type of playstyle, just pretty much annoying your enemies constantly by getting in a quick hit or two, using the dash to damage them through their block, then dashing away to avoid taking any damage of your own, and pretty much just repeating that over and over again. If you can deal 2 hits from behind, then dash through their block once they start defending themselves, that's 385 damage you've dealt without that extra damage star card either. And hopefully no damage will be taken yourself, and then like I said, if you just rinse and repeat that over and over, you'll slowly chip away at their health without losing too much of your own. On top of all of that, you do want to try your best to try and play as much of a support role as you can for your team, maximising that health buff by not only buffing yourself but buffing your squad as well, and making the most of that force push to just clear any distracted enemies away who might be attacking your teammates or whatever the case may be. Now, as for some characters to look out for, Vader, Dooku and Iden are probably the 3 main characters that can cause you some trouble in my opinion. Vader is obviously just a tank and can pretty much dominate anyone in the game if you don't play your cards right against him, so make the most of that mosquito style of play that I mentioned earlier, otherwise you will likely struggle against him. As for Dooku, his duelist ability can actually take Yoda out from full health in less than a second. Yes, you heard that right, less than 1 second. So just be wary of him and try and just draw him into using duelist, and then make sure you defend while it's active. As for Iden, her stun and the fact that you can't really block her ion shots anymore are a cause for trouble sometimes. She's not really too bad, but just make sure to keep an eye on that stun droid and don't block spam, as she will take you out before you know it. But that is going to be it for our Master Yoda Hero Guide, guys. Hopefully some of these tips did help you guys out, and if they did, then make sure to smash that like button to help support the channel. Feel free to comment down below which character you would like to see next, and I will do my best to try and get onto it as fast as possible. If you are new to the channel, then feel free to subscribe and turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on any more Battlefront 2 videos or live streams. Thank you all so much for watching. You guys have a great day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.